The age of consent was as low as 7 years old in the state of Delaware up until 1871. Here's what happened. In Delaware, the legal age of consent was set at 7 years old under colonial and early state law. The law remained in the books until 1871, when it was finally raised, good job everybody, to 10 years old. It wasn't until a major push from social reformers and activists during the Progressive Era, the late 1800s and early 1900s, that many states began raising the age of consent to 16 or older. That's when it happened. Why was it so low? You're probably asking yourself, why was it that low? Early American laws were often inherited from British common law, which had similarly low age thresholds. These laws weren't built to protect children, but to regulate property rights, virtue, and control over women's sexuality, especially in the context of marriage, because early American culture was very heavily Christian-centric. This was in valuing of how the Old Testament did things. In many cases, marriage voided prosecution. So if a man was caught having promiscuous activities with an underage girl, he could often avoid punishment simply by marrying her. Why do I know these things? Why am I bringing this up? We got to talk about this deeper and deeply, because Delaware wasn't the only place, it's just the part that I brought up the most. This is a very big issue, and it hasn't just started recently. It's not as if this came out of nowhere. You can go back and watch Elvis' Hey Little Girl Come On Here if you want to figure out how deeply it is. And that was in 1965 when that song came out. This is serious. Let's talk deeper about it. I've heard a lot of people say, well, what if it was about love? It was never about love. It was about control. It was early American culture, and really across the history of the world, about adult men often sought extremely young girls, not because it was normal, but because society allowed it, and sometimes even encouraged it. This wasn't romance, it was ownership. Young girls were treated as an extension of property. Marriage wasn't about partnership, it was about alliances, land, inheritance, and male dominance. The younger the bride, the more control the man had over her body, her mind, and her legacy. It's good to get them while they're young, essentially. Consent wasn't a concept, it was a commodity, is how everybody felt. We forgot that age of consent laws are relatively recent. In the 1800s, some U.S. states actively had an age of consent as low as 7 years old. That's what we talked about. It's not me saying something crazy. You can look it up. It wasn't raised to 16 or 18 until activists, especially women, pushed back in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The system didn't care about a child's well-being. It cared about preserving purity before marriage. That's what happened. Not protection from predators. It was about the purity of everything. Religion and the patriarchy gave it a cover. Biblical precedent, and I love the Bible, by the way, just in case any Christians want to come in here and argue with me. I love the Bible. I really do. I love everything that represents. I just don't like how people use it. Biblical precedent was often weaponized to justify older men marrying young girls. Is it good enough in the Bible? They'd argue, is what a common argument was. It's good enough now. The patriarchy wasn't just social. It was spiritualized obedience, submission, chastity. All these were demanded of women from an impossibly young age. And once a girl could bear children, society often decided that she was no longer a child. Upon that first period hitting, whether you're 10 or 12, well, guess what? You are now a woman. Good on you. This was so prevalent in early culture that it was asinine. It was absolutely psychotic in the way it operated. Weird, isn't it? You're probably asking yourself, well, why didn't anybody fight back? People fought back, but they were erased. That's what happened. There were people who saw how wrong it all was. Journalists, mothers, early feminists, black and indigenous communities who often said this was insane, all trying to protect children, especially girls. But they were called hysterical, radical, unladylike, and their voices were often buried under the weight of tradition, economy, and the sickening idea that this is just how things are. This is how things are, don't worry. So no, it was never more acceptable, it was more protected. And the fight to name it, expose it, and stop it has been going on for centuries. We're only just now unlearning the idea that silence is safer than justice. Think about this for a second. Because of the advent and rise of social media and the Me Too movement and things of that variety and cancel culture, we've actually been able to actually get more out there. And there are negative effects to Me Too and things of that variety, and negative effects to the aspect of cancel culture. But if they didn't exist, it will probably go out forever. And you may have said to yourself, well, this only happened to young women. What about young boys? Once you look at Justin Bieber, he was on stage and he got kissed by an older woman. And people just said, oh, that's funny. And he said, whoa, that would make me uncomfortable. Children have not been protected by people that claim to have wanted to protect children. We got to protect the kids. We can see this so prevalent with Jeffrey Epstein and things of that variety. It is a common part of American culture. It is deeply ingrained into the roots and bones of the structures and the systems. And you're acting surprised why it's happening. Don't be surprised. It's always been this way. We're just seeing it more because we actually have the means to see it. We have immediate access to information that cannot be manipulated as deeply as it was back then. It can't be edited and curated. It can't be picked out and pushed apart. People can get instant information nowadays. That's why we're seeing it more. That's what's happening. That's the way the world is working right now. Let's talk more about it. Girls back in the day were assets, not people. Hence why we have the term trophy wife. Because women were viewed as a prize. Other men would use women as leverage to get the things they wanted. In early America, especially colonial through the 19th century area, girls weren't seen as full individuals. They were seen as property, potential breeders, and domestic laborers. When a man married a 12-year-old, it wasn't seen as creepy. It was seen as pragmatic. That girl could bear children, cook, clean, and be molded. Love was irrelevant. Compatibility was irrelevant. She was a living dowry. In Puritan New England, girls as young as 10 to 12 were often promised to older men in arranged or apprenticeship marriage setups. These marriages consolidated wealth, land, and family alliances, not affection. You see this in where you see a big castle and you say, oh, I'm being married off. Oh, have my prince come save me. Still being saved by a man. It's still patriarchal centered. The structure was imported from British common law, which technically allowed marriage as young as 7, as we talked about before. And in such cases, the man wasn't 14 or 16. He was 30, 40, or even older. The age gap wasn't incidental. It was desired because it guaranteed control. Now, let's talk about the age of consent. I really want you to hammer in this point because I'm going to keep saying it because people don't really grasp the gravity of why I say it and why I keep saying it. In the 1800s, the average age of consent in most U.S. states was between 10 and 12. In Delaware in specific, it was 7 until 1895 specifically, around that range. Let me say that again. 7 years old. It was written into law. Consent didn't mean emotional maturity or self-determination. It meant a man could take you without it being called the R word, as long as he wasn't caught forcing it. This only began to shift during the Progressive Era. I'll give you an example of a few people, as I stated earlier. There were Christian reformers, God bless them. Very early feminists who were beaten within an inch of their life for talking back to their men. There were journalists who were bombed and lit on fire and destroyed and annihilated. This is what happened. There were women in the Women's Christian Temperance Union. They launched moral crusades against what was called, back in the day, white slavery and child exploitation. Now I know what you're going to say if you're a white person saying, this isn't just white people. There were other communities doing this. Yes, there was people in Belgium. There was people in Muslim communities doing this. There were Arabic people doing this as well. It was common in Chinese culture and Japanese culture. You're not wrong. You are not incorrect. And you are not invalid to say this. As a matter of fact, even in Africa, among the black community, this is happening. But in America, this was ingrained and deep and sedimented in the culture. It was popularized because America became a superpower. This is the important part. America became a superpower. So every other country followed suit what America did. That's why you see progressive movements happening around the world right now, because people follow suit with America. And they weren't perfect. No country is perfect. Some of it was radicalized fear. but it did help raise the age of consent in most places to 16 to 18. And I made this argument one time and people disagree with me. I said if the age of consent was 7, men would do things. And people said, no, they wouldn't. They already did. They already proved they did. It's history. I'm not stupid. I research. I learn. I look past things. The reason I even cite articles and things of that variety and actually have things to talk about is because I read and research. Enforcement was still rare though. In the early of century 16 to 18, it was still rare to see enforcement. Predators could easily marry their victims to avoid legal consequences because marriage was still legal at that age. It's insane. The Bible didn't give a clear age of marriage, and people often relied on the Bible for many things, and in many cultures, that ambiguity was weaponized. In the Hebrew Bible, Mary is often believed to have been around 12 or 14 when she betrothed Joseph. This became a theological green light for the centuries of child marriage. Clergy and religious communities in early America, especially Puritan and frontier evangelicals, often blessed these unions. They were anomalies. They were endorsed as holy. In many fundamental offshoots today, the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, I believe it's FLDS, I believe that's what it's called, I don't remember. Child brides are still married to much older prophets, justified through a divine authority. It's not new. It's the same theology, just uninterrupted. And if you don't know about the Fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, I encourage you to look deeper into them besides the things I'm putting on the screen so you can get some justification for my words. Much like how Donald Trump is protecting Epstein right now, elite men have always protected each other. It wasn't just poor families or isolated communities. Wealthy, powerful men, landowners, judges, politicians regularly engaged in relationship with girls far younger. Why? Why did they do this? Because they could. Because they could. They could shape their small little girl brains. No one wanted to challenge them, especially not when these men wrote the laws, funded the churches, and owned half the town. Think Jefferson and Sally Hemings, a 14-year-old enslaved girl who was destroyed for years, fathering multiple children, all while publicly upholding virtue. Think of that. This was the norm on plantations and gilded mansions and parliamentary halls. Girls, especially poor, black, or indigenous ones, and poor does include white girls as well. I want to point that out since you guys don't think I'm including white people here. Were seen as disposable, desirable, and unprotected. And when these men were exposed, they married the girl to save her honor, and they paid off her family. Or they just weren't punished at all because society protected the predator, not the child. And this went on for hundreds of years. Hundreds. I'm going to reiterate this point as well. Everybody didn't want this. This wasn't some regular thing. Everybody was happy with children getting married off. So many people. Anti-trafficking activists warning about predators cloaked in righteousness. Midwives, white and black. Indigenous matriarchs. In the 1870s, Josephine Butler in the UK began fighting against child endangerment and the Contagious Diseases Act that punished girls but not their abusers. 1870s. In the US, groups like the National Purity Alliance worked to raise the age of consent, but were often dismissed as hysterical. Survivors who spoke were usually shamed or silenced or institutionalized. The world wasn't deaf. It was deliberately ignoring them. So why was it so common? Because society let it be, because it saved the powerful, because it maintained order, because silencing girls was easier than holding men accountable, because no one wanted to believe it was wrong until it happened to their daughter. It was so common. These weren't glitches in the system. Child marriages, PDF files. It wasn't a glitch in the system at all. They were the system. And in many parts of the world, they still are. This isn't about shock. It isn't about clickbait. This is about the rot beneath the wallpaper of history. You don't need a true crime documentary. You need a mirror. Because it's still American. Because we didn't inherit a broken system. We inherited a system working exactly as designed. And it told us little girls were wives, that consent was optional, and men were leaders, and that silence was survival. And the worst part, it was law. I still think about the fact that it was just the law. It's always been about business, a business deal, a business transaction, a transactional, how we treated human bodies. The girl was a part of the inventory. I keep bringing up the age of consent in the 1800s. We get it. It was 7. We understand it. 10 in most states. Just a design. Just a design choice. Men 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or if they lived that long. Girls who played with dolls and no one flinched because it was seen as abuse. It wasn't seen as abuse. You thought it was seen as abuse? No, it wasn't seen as abuse. It was seen as strategy. The girl was a vessel, a womb, a hair factory, a factory for their heirs. A blank page a man could scribble his name on before puberty even started. This is what it was. Do you know why it is so indoctrinated in society for women to shave and men not to shave? Do you know why? Do you know why? Do you know why? Because it's childlike. Childlike features, petite, clear skin. It's what young girls have. Do you know why it's loved? Why tight little bottoms were loved? Why up until not even that many years ago, people valued, oh, does my butt look big? Because small little girl butts was the exact thing people wanted. That's what happened. You think age of consent was about protecting kids? No, it was about preserving property. Virginity was an asset. And once it was used, the girl was devalued until she got married. So the people that attacked these young women, they married their victims. It was called honor. That's how they phrased it. It was a legal loophole. A word scribbled in a courtroom, margined by men who never had to be afraid walking home alone. If a girl said no, didn't matter. If a girl was underage, didn't matter if he married her. And so they did, again and again and again. One thing I often found was interesting was how many children my grandmother had. How many? Grandmother had 22 children. 22. 22 children. That's a lot of kids, isn't it? A lot of kids. Why did she have that many kids? Because she got married at 10 years old. That's what happened. My grandmother got married at 10 years old. I'm not American. I won't point this out. I was born in Egypt. My grandmother was. She was born here. 98 years old she is. She was married at 10. I want you to think about that for a second. Really think about that. When I think about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson and things of that variety, I get really happy with how much we've progressed, how far we've come. Because it started as a whisper, a hand over a mouth, a room full of people pretending, oh, I don't hear you, la 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 la, and then someone screamed at another, and then the internet caught fire. The system said, wait your turn. They said, we're out of time. The world said, don't rock the boat. And they said, sink it, sink the boat, sink the boat. Cancel culture and Me Too weren't born out of rage. They were born out of exhaustion because no one listens to polite. No one listens to whispers. But they will listen to a viral hashtag and a 10-second clip that ends a career. For decades, survivors asked nicely, filed reports, sat through HR meetings, watched their abusers get promoted. They were told, you'll ruin his life. Think about his kids. Oh my God, think about that. As if their life wasn't already ruined. But the hands they never invited in the trauma they weren't allowed to name. And then one day, someone said it online. Me too. And suddenly silence had a name. And stories had a rhythm. And people who thought they were alone realized they were a chorus. One voice is a tragedy. Millions is a reckoning. Cancel culture does not exist for the powerful and the upper crust, the 1%. It doesn't. They get Netflix specials, they get book deals, they get second chances and sanctified PR statements. I'm so sorry. I didn't know when I had no clue what was going on. Cancel culture is a scalpel, not a guillotine. It doesn't kill. It reveals. It forces you to look at the pattern, at the silence, at the people who were never believed because they didn't have the right last name or a blue check mark. Most canceled people aren't gone. They're just momentarily inconvenienced, realistically. But victims, the victims, they disappear for decades. They lose jobs. They lose sanity. They lose the right to be angry because their trauma makes other people uncomfortable. Me Too is the messiest kind of justice. The kind that doesn't wait for courtrooms because courtrooms were never built for survivors anyway. Think about the law that I just stated. So the internet became the courthouse. Twitter became the confession booth. TikTok became the diary. And suddenly a waitress in Missouri has the same platform as a film executive in Los Angeles. How strange that happened. And yeah, sometimes people get it wrong. Sometimes exaggerations are put on accusations. That's what happens. Sometimes the mob burns down the wrong house. And those ones are the minority. The deep, deep minority. But the first time ever, I know you're curious about why he's burning down the wrong house, but the house for the first time is actually flammable. The lie we were told was that the victims lie. But statistically, you want to bring up statistics? Abusers do. And they do it with better lawyers. They do it with better words, with more money. Because that's why accusations stick so deeply. Because people are so often not believed. That's why they're so fervent and so angry nowadays. The anger is justified. Sometimes someone gets caught in a crossfire, and that happens sometimes. Just because an angry woman wants to ruin it for the rest of everybody else. I know that happens. But it doesn't silence the voice of real victims. Not even slightly. I remember how Me Too began. It was a black woman talking about her father. I remember the exact moment it started. I remember when another black woman spoke up. And it was a small group of women. Started on Tumblr, then went to Facebook, then a few people on Instagram, and then white women got the credit. I'm not really sure what happened there. I don't know what's happened there. And then the working class victims got ignored. All the working class got ignored. White and black together. They both got ignored. And the celebrities got headlines. And still, it mattered. It still mattered that the voice was getting out there, though. Because now survivors name names. That's good. They call out behavior before it escalates. They know they're not the only one, and that changes everything. Cancel culture didn't make the world cruel. It just made cruelty visible. It didn't create division. It revealed who was never on our side to begin with. And the price of accountability is a few uncomfortable conversations and a loss of a sponsorship deal. That's a bargain, realistically. It's a bargain compared to what victims have to actually go through. It really is. Because you know what happens when a rich person disappears, a James Charles or a Cody Ko? You know what happens to those people? They just come back later. James Charles still posting, get 1 million views, by the way. Cody Ko is posting on his second channel to his dedicated fans, so nobody talks about what he did with the 16-year-old, things of that variety. No one cares. But at least it affected them. And that's a step in the right direction, if I've ever seen one. Now, some people say it's gone too far. This is ridiculous. It's ruining careers of good people. I say, good. I know it's evil to say that and messed up and horrifying, and some people actually don't deserve it. But for centuries, it didn't go far enough. Cancel culture isn't about punishment. It's about patterns. Who gets protected? Who gets believed? Who gets to walk away smiling while somebody else breaks in the bathroom stall 5 years later, still wondering if it's their fault? Me Too and cancel cultures aren't movements anymore. They're memories that won't be burned again. They're warnings. They're not untouchable. They're not unrecorded, and your legacy isn't bulletproof anymore. This isn't about revenge. This is equilibrium. This is a world where victims don't have to be saints to be taken seriously. Where silence isn't the price of survival, where platforms don't mean immunity, and where the person with less power finally has some. And yes, sometimes it gets chaotic. Sometimes it's really messy. Sometimes the mob gets too loud. But maybe that's what justice looks like when it gets ignored for too long. Maybe it's not a clean verdict. Maybe it screams that echoes through every bathroom, backstage, and back alley until someone finally listens. When I was younger, I was much younger, I remember when I myself got attacked by my older female teacher. And I remember being congratulated by every man around me saying, "Good job, bro. How'd you do it? Wow, this is amazing." I recall this deeply. I do. I remember. And I remember feeling so bad, so horrifically bad. And it hurt my chest because I hated every second of that. I hated the encounter. I hated it. And after I told everybody, I told my principal, I told other people. My principal said, "Oh, well, she's hot." No one protected me. No one. Not a single person protected me. And this went on for a minute. Long time. Went on for a long time. till someone in my family that was male did the same thing to me. Same thing to me. Then people start caring. People said, that's gay. They said, that's gay. Because I think their thought process, at least this is what I believe, and this may be true because I'm really good at analyzing how horrifying things happen to me. When I got assaulted by my teacher, they assumed that I was the one having the fun time. But she was the one with the strap, is what happened. Didn't tell them that part. Nobody ever asked. They just said that was cool. And so when my family member did it, they said, oh, you're getting treated like a woman. That can't stand. You're a man. And so they outraged because I was being treated like a woman. This is why I'm so happy that people are getting destroyed, losing platforms, and why it's so messy now. The reason I researched it so deeply, the reason I've learned so much about all these topics, the reason why I know that men don't like body hair because they crave the childlike features. A lot of things I've learned and just understood about human nature, about how people operate, about how they work. I've learned so much. I don't have any poetic words for the end of this, but I do want you to remember one thing. Please remember.
I'm your nigga night, be my loyalties low. Ooh, happy to try what you need. Your world, I love to live in it. Ooh, I love the ride.